The creek in Silver Creek Valley could sing sweet, but it didn't always run deep. Folks around there often forgot that truth, judging by the shine instead of the substance. Clara Mitchell learned it the hard way. She was 16 when consumption took both her parents within months of each other. Overnight, the Iron Spur Ranch, 2,000 acres of Wyoming grassland, belonged to a girl barely old enough to understand ledgers. Her father's lawyer, Martin Hale, handled things efficiently. He told her the ranch would stay secure only if she married the banker's son, Evan Cross. Clara remembered sitting in her father's parlor, wearing a black dress that still smelled like funeral lilies, while Hale explained her future as if it were a line item in an account book. By summer's end, the marriage was done. Evan Cross came to the church in a carriage that gleamed like a mirror under the sun. His suit was perfect, his smile practiced, and his eyes as cold as the coins in his father's bank. "You're a lucky girl," the preacher's wife whispered as Clara walked down the aisle in her mother's ivory gown. But luck had nothing to do with it. The ceremony felt more like a business deal than a union. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, Evan's kiss landed quick and cold, a seal on a contract. That night in the house her father built, Clara realized what kind of man she had married. He mocked her for the way she spoke, the way she cooked, even the way she breathed. "You're not a banker's wife," he told her once, his voice flat as a ledger. "You're a ranch girl pretending to be something you'll never be." Every insult stripped another piece from her spirit. He criticized her draw at church socials, sneered at her biscuits, corrected her in public until she stopped speaking altogether. By the first winter, the laughter that used to fill the Mitchell home had gone silent. Then came the fire. It was a February night, the wind howling down from the mountains. Clara had been reading her mother's recipe book by lamplight when she smelled smoke. She rushed outside to find the barn engulfed in flames. "Evan," she shouted. "The barn's on fire." He ran toward the blaze, yelling about the papers he kept in the barn office, bank documents, deeds, and contracts. She screamed for him to stop, but he disappeared into the burning building. By the time the roof caved in, his voice had already gone quiet. They found his body the next morning clutching a half-melted strongbox. Inside were nothing but ashes. At his graveside, Clara didn't cry. Instead, she whispered to the wind, "Never again. No man will own me. Not ever." For the next 3 years, she lived by that vow. She turned the Iron Spur Ranch into one of the best-run spreads in Silver Creek Valley. She learned to read the markets, bargain with buyers, and ride herd like any man alive. She stopped wearing lace and perfume. She stopped listening to gossip. People called her the Widow Cross, a woman made of stone. But behind that calm, her loneliness howled louder than any Wyoming wind. One spring morning, while checking the south pasture, Clara saw movement near the milking barn. A tall ranch hand was working quietly with the dairy cows, speaking to them in a low, gentle voice. She recognized him. Luke Harper, a man who had been on her payroll for years, but had barely spoken 10 words to her. "Easy there, girl," he murmured to the old milk cow, his hand steady. "Ain't nobody rushing you." Clara paused, watching. Something about the way he moved, slow, patient, sure, pulled at her. When he noticed her, he straightened and touched the brim of his hat. "Morning, Mrs. Cross," he said. "Bessie's giving near a gallon a day now." "That's good to hear," she replied, surprised by how warm his tone felt after years of cold politeness from others. Luke wasn't handsome the way Evan had been. His charm came from something quieter. His hands were rough, his smile shy, his eyes the color of river mud after rain. When he spoke, there was kindness in every word. "You've got away with her," Clara said. "Animals know when you're patient," he answered. "Most folks forget that." She couldn't explain why those words stayed with her, echoing long after she left the barn. Maybe because patience was something no man had ever given her. Days later, she found another excuse to cross Luke's path. He was cooking supper for the ranch hands in the bunkhouse kitchen, the air thick with the scent of simmering stew. "That smells wonderful," she said from the doorway. Luke smiled, stirring the pot. "Just making the most of what we've got, ma'am. Waste not, want not." "You cook?" she asked. "Had to learn young," he said. "My grandmother raised me." "Said a man who can't feed himself ain't half a man." Clara laughed softly. A real laugh. The first in years. The sound startled her almost as much as it startled him. When he showed her the small garden he'd planted behind the bunkhouse, neat rows of herbs and vegetables, she felt something shift inside her. The smell of earth and green things brought back memories of her mother's garden, long dead since Evan had called it a waste of time. "It's beautiful," she said. Luke shook his head. "Just practical. Things grow if you care for them." "Maybe," Clara whispered, touching a leaf gently. "But beauty has never been just practical." As the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in gold, Luke looked at her with quiet understanding. "Gardens come back when someone believes in them again," he said. And for the first time in years, Clara felt something in her heart begin to stir, something she thought had burned to ash the night the barn collapsed. She began finding reasons to cross Luke's path more often. She told herself it was business, checking fences, inspecting the herd, reviewing feed supply. But deep down, she knew better. His quiet steadiness was like cool shade after years of blistering heat. He never flattered her, never looked at her like a prize to be claimed. When Luke spoke, his words carried respect, not calculation. One afternoon, she found him repairing a section of fence near the creek. The summer air shimmered with heat, the kind that made sweat bead on skin and thoughts drift toward things better left unspoken. Luke worked with his sleeves rolled up, the muscles in his forearms catching the sun. He noticed her watching and offered a small grin. "Fence was sagging," he said. "Figured I'd fix it before the herd wanders through." "You take initiative," Clara replied, settling herself on a smooth boulder nearby. "Most hands wait to be told." Luke paused, pushing back a stray lock of hair. "Doesn't sit right, leaving something broken when I can mend it." "You like fixing things?" she asked. "I like seeing something whole again," he said quietly. "Some things stay broken, but others just need time and care." His words settled deep. For a moment, neither spoke. The creek murmured beside them, and Clara realized she hadn't felt this kind of peace in years. After a while, she asked softly, "What brought you here, Luke? You could have worked anywhere." He hesitated before answering. "I was engaged once. Thought I had my life all figured out. The girl wanted things I couldn't give. When I couldn't keep up, she found someone who could. After that, I just needed space to start over." Clara nodded slowly. "So, you came to Silver Creek Valley. Place had the right name," he said, smiling faintly. "And your foreman gave me a fair chance." Something in his story mirrored her own. Betrayal had carved them both hollow. Yet here they stood, two people trying to rebuild from ruins. As the weeks passed, their friendship deepened. They spoke of everything and nothing, cattle prices, weather patterns, books her father once loved. Their conversations always circled back to the same feeling. Comfort. It was unfamiliar, but it felt right. One evening, Clara went to the barn to help Luke stack feed sacks before an approaching storm. The air was heavy with the scent of rain and something else neither of them dared name. When she tried to lift a sack too heavy for her, she stumbled. Luke caught her before she fell, his hands firm around her arms. "Easy there," he said, steadying her. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the world stilled. "Maybe I should leave the heavy work to you," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Maybe you should let someone help you more often," he replied, his tone gentle but edged with meaning. She didn't move. The warmth of his hands lingered like sunlight on her skin. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the strange, exhilarating danger of wanting something again. Luke, she whispered, unsure of what came next. Yes, ma'am. Call me Clara, she said, the words catching between them. He smiled, slow, warm, unguarded. Clara, he repeated, her name sounding like a promise. Something inside her melted then, a wall she hadn't realized she'd built, crumbling in the space of a single breath. Before the moment could deepen, thunder cracked outside, breaking the spell. They stepped apart quickly, both pretending to focus on work they had already finished. That night, Clara lay awake listening to the rain pound against her window, replaying the feel of Luke's touch and the way her name had sounded in his voice. It was terrifying how much comfort she found in that memory. The next morning, Silver Creek Valley had already begun to whisper. Dr. Wade Collins, the town physician and one of her persistent suitors, arrived unannounced at the ranch. Clara was in the barn with Luke, going over plans for the cattle drive, when the doctor appeared in the doorway. "Clara, my dear," he said, his tone too familiar for her liking. "Might I have a private word?" "I'm discussing ranch matters with Mr. Harper," she said evenly. "If you have something to say, you can say it here." Collins's smile faltered. "Very well, I'll be plain. People are talking about you and this man. As someone who cares for your reputation, I must warn you that appearances matter." The air turned brittle. Luke straightened, his jaw tightening, but he said nothing. Clara's voice was calm but sharp. "My reputation is my concern, doctor, not yours. You may not realize how improper this looks," Collins pressed. "A widow and her hired hand spending so much time alone." "Enough." Clara's tone cut through his words like a whip. "Mr. Harper is a good man, and I won't have his name dragged through gossip to feed your pride." The doctor's face reddened. "You'll regret this defiance when the town turns on you." "I'd rather stand alone in truth than surrounded by liars," she replied. When Collins stormed off, Luke looked uneasy. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to cause you trouble." "You didn't," she said firmly. "You've done nothing wrong." He looked down at his hands. "You don't owe me defense. Folks will believe what they want." "Then let them," Clara said, surprising even herself. "I won't let small minds dictate my life again." Luke lifted his gaze, meeting hers with something raw and steady. "That kind of courage, it's rare. I learned it the hard way," she said quietly. They stood close, the air between them heavy with unspoken truth. For the first time, Clara realized she wasn't afraid. Not of gossip, not of loneliness, not of love that might break her again. What she feared was missing the chance to live fully while she still could. Outside, the storm clouds were breaking apart, and a shaft of sunlight spilled through the barn window, landing across Luke's face. Clara reached out, brushing a streak of dust from his cheek. It was such a small gesture, but it carried the weight of 1,000 words neither dared say aloud. Luke's breath caught, his voice low when he spoke. "Clara, if this costs you everything." "Then it's a fair price," she interrupted. "Because for the first time in years, I feel alive." The summer rolled on, and with it came new challenges for the Iron Spur Ranch. The drought had cracked the soil, the wells were running low, and the cattle were restless from thirst. Clara worked from dawn till dusk, refusing to yield an inch of her father's land. Luke was always there beside her, quiet, dependable, and steady as the mountain line to the west. Then one afternoon, a dust cloud appeared on the main road. From it emerged a long black carriage drawn by 4 gleaming horses. The driver pulled up before the house, and from the carriage stepped a man in a fine gray suit, boots polished to mirror shine. Raiden Holt. He was one of the wealthiest cattle merchants west of the Missouri, and a man who believed every price could be bargained, every soul could be bought. "Mrs. Cross," he said, tipping his hat with an easy grin. "Word travels fast. Folks say you've turned this ranch into the finest spread in the valley. I thought it time we met." "Mr. Holt," Clara replied coolly. "I've heard your name as well. You're the man who buys land the moment owners start to sweat. He chuckled. Business is business, ma'am. But I admire strength when I see it. And I've been meaning to discuss a partnership. Partnership, she echoed. Sell me a share of Iron Spur, he said smoothly. I'll handle transport and trade. You'll double your profit, maybe triple. I'm not interested in selling what's mine, Clara said. Holt's eyes sharpened, though his smile remained. You might think differently when you see what the drought does next. Or when certain rumors grow too loud. Clara's spine stiffened. Rumors? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. A widow spending evenings alone with her ranch hand, tongues wag fast in small towns. People listen. Banks get nervous. Credit dries up. Her eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me, Mr. Holt? Not at all, he said lightly. Just offering help before the wind changes. Before Clara could answer, Luke appeared from behind the barn, wiping dust from his hands. The look in his eyes told her he had heard enough. Ma'am, he said quietly, the east fence gave way. I'll fix it before sundown. Holt gave Luke a long, dismissive glance. That your new business partner, Mrs. Cross? Clara's tone was sharp. He's worth 10 of you, Mr. Holt. Holt's grin faltered. You'll regret turning down my offer, he said, tipping his hat again. And maybe you'll wish you'd kept better company. He climbed back into his carriage and rode off, the wheels kicking up a cloud of dust that hung in the air long after he was gone. That night, Clara stood on her porch, watching lightning dance on the far horizon. She sensed trouble brewing, not just from the weather, but from Holt's pride. Luke joined her quietly. He's the kind that doesn't take no kindly, Luke said. I know, she replied. But this land's been taken from me once. Never again. Luke looked out over the dark fields. If he comes for you, he comes through me first. She turned toward him. You don't have to fight my battles, Luke. Maybe not, he said softly. But I'm standing beside you, come what may. The storm broke soon after, not rain, but something worse. A week later, one of the ranch's herds went missing from the northern range. Tracks showed that men had driven them off under cover of darkness. Clara and Luke followed the trail for miles until they found a cattle pen near Dry Creek, Holt's territory. When they rode up, 2 of Holt's hired guns stepped out to block the gate. Turn around, ma'am, one said. These herds belong to Mr. Holt now. Clara's jaw set. These brands say otherwise. Brands can change, the man sneered. Before he could draw, Luke had his rifle up. Not while I'm breathing. The standoff stretched, the wind howling between them. Then Holt himself rode out from behind the corral, calm as ever. You should have stayed home, Mrs. Cross, he said. This isn't your fight. It's my herd, she shot back. You stole from me. I reclaimed opportunity, he replied. You refused business, now business takes what it's owed. Luke's finger tightened on the trigger. You call this business, I call it robbery. Holt smirked. Careful, Harper. One word from me and you'll swing for threatening a man of standing. Clara stepped forward, fury blazing in her eyes. You'll swing first if I bury your men for trespass. Something in her voice, cold, commanding, unshakable, made Holt hesitate. Fine, he said finally. Take your cattle. But know this, widow. The valley remembers who defies its kings. They drove the herd home through the night, exhaustion and adrenaline carrying them. When they reached the ranch, Luke turned to her. You could have been killed out there, he said. So could you, she replied. Wasn't thinking about that, he said quietly. What were you thinking about, she asked. That if something happened to you, I'd have nothing left worth staying for. She froze. The night air was cool, but her heart burned with something she could no longer hide. Without a word, she stepped forward and kissed him, slow, trembling, and certain. For the first time in years, Clara Mitchell wasn't the widow Cross or the owner of Iron Spur Ranch. She was simply a woman, alive and unafraid. The days after the cattle standoff were tense. Word spread through Silver Creek Valley that Clara Cross had stood her ground against Raiden Holt. Some called her reckless. Others called her brave. But no one dared cross her fences again. Still, Clara knew Holt wasn't done. Men like him didn't forgive defiance. They plotted in the dark and struck when no one was looking. One night, as the harvest moon hung low and red above the hills, the dogs began to bark. Luke was already out of bed before Clara reached the window. From the porch, they saw the glow, orange and furious, rising from the west pasture. "The stables," Luke said. "They've set it ablaze." By the time they reached the barn, the fire had already devoured half the roof. Smoke stung their eyes. Horses screamed inside the stalls, kicking at the doors. Luke grabbed a blanket, soaked it in water, and threw it over his shoulders before running straight into the fire. Clara shouted for him to stop, but he was gone into the smoke. She ran after him, pulling open stall latches, urging the horses out one by one. The flames roared louder, feeding on dry timber and hay. "Luke," she cried. "I've got the last one," he shouted back, his voice muffled through the smoke. Then came the crash, a burning beam fell, trapping him near the far wall. Clara didn't think. She ran to him, her sleeve catching fire as she pulled the beam away. He pushed her toward the door first, coughing hard, and together they stumbled out into the cold night air. The fire raged behind them, but they were alive. The horses were safe, the barn lost. When dawn came, the ranch lay quiet, blackened, and wet from the bucket lines. Luke's arm was burned, and Clara's face streaked with soot. But when she looked at him, she smiled. "We saved what mattered," she said. Luke took her hand. "You mean the stock?" "No," she whispered. "I mean you." For a moment, they stood in silence, the valley hushed except for the wind sweeping over the ashes. A week later, Sheriff Dunn rode in with 2 deputies. They'd caught Holt's men south of town, bragging in a saloon about a job well done. Under questioning, they confessed Holt had paid them to burn the ranch. Holt himself fled east before the law could find him. The town's gossip turned overnight. People who once whispered now offered help. Fences were mended, hay was donated, and neighbors who had once doubted her finally saw Clara for who she was, a woman forged in fire and grit. As autumn settled in, the Iron Spur Ranch stood reborn. A new barn rose where the old one had burned, stronger and wider. The first snow came early that year, falling soft over the valley like forgiveness. On Christmas Eve, Luke came to the house with a small box in his hand. His arm was healed, though the scar still ran like a pale river down his skin. He looked nervous, like a boy half his age. "Clara," he said, his voice low. "I don't have much to offer, except my hands, my word. And whatever years I've got left." She smiled gently. "And what would you ask for in return?" "Only your trust," he said. "And maybe the chance to build something new, together." Clara opened the box. Inside was a simple silver band, rough and unpolished, made from a horseshoe nail. "It's not much," he said quickly. "But it's honest." She reached up and kissed him, the answer clear before she ever spoke it. That winter, the townsfolk gathered again at the little church by the creek, the same place where Clara had once stood beside a man who never loved her. This time, her eyes were bright, her heart certain, her hand steady in Luke's. When the preacher asked if she would take this man, she smiled. "With all my heart," she said. And for the first time in years, the bells of Silver Creek Valley rang not for loss or fire, but for love born from the ashes. As snow drifted over the roofs and smoke curled from the chimneys, Clara looked out across her land, the fences, the barn, the open fields glowing under the winter sun. The iron spur had survived storms, drought, and fire. And so had she. She took Luke's hand, and together they walked down the path toward the house, their footprints side by side in the new snow. Thank you for watching Fire Over Silver Creek. If you felt the heart of this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more cinematic tales from the West. Your support keeps these stories alive. See you in the next ride.